welcome Springfield Faith Center, and welcome to the group discussion video for this week, May 10th, and the days following. So we are going to be processing Rachel's message from this morning and just taking some thoughts out of that, looking at some highlights, and then hopefully drawing out some meaningful and beneficial questions that we can be chewing on this week in our relationships with each other. So I'm going to go around and let everyone introduce themselves first. So Rachel, can we start with you? Who are you and how are you connected to the church and what we're doing?
Okay. Well, my name is Rachel, Rachel Lanning. I have no title at the church. I just show up for services at this moment in time. I have been a part of Springfield Faith Center a long time. I've been in the staff in the past, but really just enjoy being a part of the greater church body.
Cool. Good stuff. All right, Tony, let's go to you next. Go ahead.
I'm Tony Scarcello, and I do the high school and middle school ministry at the church, and I love doing it.
Good stuff. All right, Jed, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Jed Driscoll. I've been part of the church since, I guess Awana was still a thing, for those who remember. And yeah, I'm just in high school right now, going into my senior year next year.
Yep. And this week's a little bit special. We've been talking about getting some different faces involved here. And one of the things that we wanted to do was have Tony start inviting some of the high school students periodically. And that's one of the reasons that Jed is here, just to keep getting some different perspectives and some different voices and things like that, and keep a good mix here for the sake of keeping the conversation lively and interesting and moving forward. So I'm Daniel. I'm one of the pastors at the church. And so let's go ahead and get started. So this morning, the message came from Rachel. She shared out what was it? Psalm 37 that you were talking out of. So what we're going to do is go around and we'll have each of us share kind of the big takeaway that we walked out with, and then we'll have some conversation from there. So Tony, do you mind if we start with you on that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
The message was really powerful for me. I think the big takeaway was like holding space and creating space for the Lord to work in you. And I loved that, Rachel, that you connected that idea of like, God is not working in us only to like work in us, but that work in us will also transpire into some sort of service to the folks around us. And that really moves me, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. But I think the way you started off the message really hit me the most when you talked about the difference between being like a good and blessed work versus like sanctified and like already perfect. And I love that like dichotomy, because I think that's a hard tension to balance, of being somebody who acknowledges that you're made in God's image and so you're good, and that you're made with original blessing, but that time spent with God is what leads to the sanctification, like purifying process, I guess, where we can actually claim the righteousness of Christ in our lives. And so that stuff really, that hit me hard. I loved that stuff.
Cool. Good. Yeah, that's one of the things that I know for me is a personal point of like, I talk about it a lot, that idea that value and growth are connected to each other, but they're not the same thing. Like my value is set and it's fixed and it's based on what God has spoken over my life, and my growth is important, but my growth doesn't determine my value. And so that process of, they're connected to each other, but I'm not worth more or less depending on how much or little I participate in, my growth with the Lord and that stuff. So yeah, I like that too. So Jed, for you, what was the big takeaway this weekend?
What I took away from the message had to do with an experience I had about 2 days ago, I believe, when I was at the tail end of a bike ride. I was going on to Thurston and the North Thurston area where the Willamette Lane Park is. And there's this bench that faces through like a kind of a window in the trees that you can see like the mountainside, you can see fields and stuff. But it's facing, I'm not remembering which way the sun sets, dang it. But anyway, it's facing away from the sunset. And so I just realized that after staring at it for like 10 minutes, that kind of spoke to me. Is like, we spend so much time looking at our past and what we regret or what we think we should have done, and thinking of ways that we could have fixed that, when the way we can change is like ahead of us, and his path to his will for us and our purpose is ahead of us. And no matter what we've done in the past, we can make the right decision to push forward and to better ourselves and to step into God's will and to impact people in the way Jesus would. And so the way that relates to the message is the story with the pearl necklace really impacts me, because like the whole COVID-19 thing has kind of in a way freed us all this time, like open space, I guess, to be able to easier spend time with God, to easier turn towards what we should be doing and like within his will. And like we have all these distractions removed. We don't have as much stress. I mean, I don't have as much stress. It's probably because I'm like below adult level, I guess. But still, I have all this time to just spend time with God, spend time with silence, and just kind of reflecting on who I want to be and what God wants me to be. And it just enables me to, pick up the real pearl necklace, I guess.
Yeah. There was a comment that you actually made earlier before we started filming in regards to that, where you were saying that with the pearl necklace, a lot of us have, we've had to set it down. We haven't had an option to hang on to it because of the circumstances. And a lot of us are dealing with this issue of being upset about it and being annoyed that we've had to put it down instead of looking forward and seeing what God is doing instead. And I like that perspective too, that like you were saying, that forward thinking, that forward looking kind of looking for the good that God is bringing about in this moment, rather than purely lamenting what has been lost. So,
and even for people who are still working full time, I know for like myself, my wife and I, before all this, we don't have kids, and so we had something every night on the calendar after work to go hang out with friends or something at the church. There is still space being carved out for a lot of people to like just be alone with the Lord, even if like the stress has gone up and the busyness is about the same in the work life. There's still time to like cultivate that time in your relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was like to have free evenings away from my children. That's, it's a distant memory. So my takeaway personally was in that third point, Rachel, that you talked about, resting in the Lord and about protecting and cultivating that space. And it was especially when you were talking about the quote, I think it was from Nouwen, where he compared it to celibacy, but not celibacy in the sense of romantic relationships, celibacy in the sense of deliberate and intentional empty space that you hold, for God. And it was funny because you and I were talking about the message earlier this week, and you even shared about that quote, and it didn't click for me when you were talking about it earlier. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I can kind of see how that relates. But when you were sharing this morning, it really landed. And I thought, oh yeah, that's good. I like that. And that was what was meaningful, for me, was the deliberate and intentional goal of creating and maintaining that empty space for God. So it was good stuff.
I'm reading AJ's book, Subversive Sabbath. Have you guys read that?
I haven't read that one.
What you said today, a lot of that really resonates with the book. And one of the things he talks about most is how our culture is not built around like taking time to just delight in the Lord, to just be in the Lord's presence and taking the whole day to do that. And in fact, the way our world is designed is to almost prevent stuff like that from taking place, because we don't ever want empty space in our lives.
Right.
And one of the quotes he says that kind of really resonated with me, that reminded me of what you talked about this morning, was he said that there's nothing healthy about being well adjusted to a sick society. And creating like space to just be connected to God like is a way to be like a healthy person in a world that's running itself sick.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I like that. All right. So let's go back and let's kind of continue those thoughts and work toward, okay, well, that was what was meaningful to you, but where do you see God leading you forward in your life toward that thing becoming more a part of your regular practice? So Tony, let's go ahead and go back to you, but what you shared earlier, where do you see God kind of going with that because you highlighted kind of that value piece for you. Where's God leading you in that?
Well, I think the piece that God is leading me in specifically is that there are a lot of areas of my life where I kind of want to pinpoint, and I'm like, okay, I want to improve that area. I want to do better there. But I think there is something just supernatural that takes place when you're just alone with the Lord. I describe it like being at a gym. Like if you work out at a gym over and over and over again, the first month you're not going to notice any growth that's taking place, but a year into it, you're going to notice massive changes. And the same as our time spent alone with the Lord. And so for me personally, my rhythm of like making sure alone time with God happens isn't the best. I'd like for it to happen every day in the week, but I don't have like a very specific rhythm set in place. And so for me, like the piece that I feel most compelled to draw attention to is to just like implement that rhythm into my life, to hold empty space for God and make sure there is time for that every day, if possible.
Yeah. And so taking the time to ask yourself that question, like, what is my rhythm? What is my pattern? Where in my life am I being intentional about creating that space? Or I suppose a corollary question could be, am I, trying to create a rhythm? Am I leaving space, or am I working hard to eliminate all the empty spaces? Am I creating, am I designing my life such that there is no room for God? And how can I be interacting with that part of, the way that I do life? I like that.
Yeah.
So, Jed, for you, you were talking about kind of that call toward the future and that sense of God still has something for you, and that picking up that pearl necklace for you. Where do you see God leading you in that direction, and kind of how is he walking you forward toward that?
I feel like I've been forced to have, I guess, extra empty space. Like there's a period of 2 hours where all electronics are turned off at my house. So I've been mostly using that and past that time to like, go for a bike ride to a place I was talking about and just either read my Bible or just listen to what God has to talk to me about. And funny thing happened. I was going for a bike ride. I was gonna start going home, but then I felt like God told me to take 11 laps around like this neighborhood or whatever. And everything is established by 2 or 3 witnesses. So I just asked for a second witness by the time I got to the end of the block, because if I didn't, I was gonna head home. And and then this massive bus with the number 11 Thurston on it, like for like its band or whatever, just comes plowing down the street. And I just looked at it, I'm like, there's absolutely no doubt that that was God. And so I did the 11 laps, and then by the end of it, nothing happened. I knew that it was God speaking, but nothing happened. And at the very end of it, I don't know, I felt like he said, sometimes stuff isn't supposed to happen and that we're just supposed to wait, you know? And there's been things that I've been rushing along in my life that I feel like I just need to just set aside. It's not for me now. And I can just be secure in the fact that I don't have to stress over that, and that kind of time coming will be later.
Yeah.
I guess so for the people confused about there, like I felt like he said that there like isn't a girl for me. Like at the moment, at the place everyone is, there isn't a girl for me. And so it's just like, it's freeing, because I just know that nothing's supposed to happen right now for until he says. And it's just, I don't know, it's freeing that I know that God said that, and I know the whole 11 laps thing happened, and that it's okay when nothing happens, that I can be secure in that what I did was what God wanted me to do, and nothing happened, It's just,
and you were still deliberately and intentionally practicing that act of making space for him and trying to listen and trying to trust. I like that.
And Jed, you never know if this video goes viral. There could be a few girls for you. Going on YouTube.
Well, but maybe later when people have changed.
Oh, well,
Gosh, if this goes
yeah.
viral. No.
I want to hear the follow up. I want to follow up. So Patrick is taking some notes for us, and his question that he just shared, his question for this part is anyone out there interested in Jed? So the answer is yes. We are interested in Jed. That's why you're here right now, is because we are interested in you being part of this conversation and in hearing what God's doing in your life. So, so for me, you know,
Apparently Patrick wants to be part of the conversation.
some quality spirituality going on here. I love it. So, for me, you know, I feel like where God is kind of drawing me forward is in having a sense of value for creating that empty space, because so often what I value is filling my time with things and making sure that I'm not bored, making sure that my space is not empty, making sure that I have something. And I realize that I don't necessarily have a high value or a high priority on creating and protecting and maintaining those empty spaces in my life, like you were talking about this morning, Rachel. And I know moving forward that God, you know, wants to speak into that area, just how I value having that emptiness. So I guess the question there would be, you know, how does God want to change your focus or your perspective on the empty spaces in life? How does he want to change your perspective on your own busyness and how you're filling your time? What does he have to say to you about that? So
Can I add something here? Because I know I've heard a lot about time in the area of empty space, which definitely has been impacting people. But I know for me, a lot of it is actually in the area of solitude. And I know, like, for instance, that quote I came across several years ago when I had moved away and I'd gone to school, and was all of a sudden, all my relationships, there was massive distance, you know, geographical distance going on. I didn't have you, Daniel. Well, I actually had you when I first moved down there.
Yeah.
But I didn't have all my best friends, all my people. And I went from being a pastor in Springfield Faith Center, so deeply connected with so many lives, to all of a sudden massive empty space where people used to be. And so sometimes it's our relationships.
Yeah.
And it's transitioning from kind of a place of being really, really close with people all the time to being connected and experiencing solitude in the Lord, and an assurance that it's not based on you always being with someone and interacting and talking, but based on something else. And I guess I want to bring that up because I know a lot of that for me, that's still ongoing, even in the midst of, I mean, even in my grieving. That's the huge part of it. It's the loss of a relationship. And I know for me, it's doubly compounded by the fact that when I first lost Dad, my family, they were some of my greatest comfort. And now with COVID, I don't have access to them like I did, that geographical proximity. But the reality is that we can experience solitude in the Lord, and so that there can be this empty space, but it doesn't have to be this lonely, awful empty space. It can be a very full and complete empty space.
Yeah.
You know, that for me, because even in the season, I find myself so bankrupt emotionally. Sometimes I still work, but there's just an emotional bankruptcy and empty space. And it's learning to offer that to God and discovering, I know, Tony, you were commenting on the first part earlier of just how the being and the doing, and some of that dichotomy of both of them playing out, but just experiencing how God still empowers us, even in the midst of that bankruptcy, like resources that I used to possess that aren't there anymore, and where he's still able to touch people. I just have to be willing to honor and like acknowledge that empty space and surrender it to him as his space to move in.
Yeah.
And often that's in the midst of my life, you know, that's in the midst of while I'm at work, or while I'm at the grocery store, or if I'm home by myself and my.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment on that? I really like what you said about the space of like relationship, I guess I'd call it, I guess. Because kind of interesting, like at least in school life, people tend to hold quantity of like friendships and like relationships over quality. And now that we have so little people to interact with, we're kind of having to switch to trying to like put like a lot of effort into the relationships with people. Like at least for me, because one of my friends, he's one of my neighbors, he's like the only pretty much the only person like friend I can interact with now, because we go on bike rides and stuff. And I don't think I've ever felt so connected with him, even though he's lived next door to me for like a solid
Hmm.
8 years. And I've just it, it's those times with him that I feel the least lonely. And I'm starting to realize that even when interacting with friends at school and stuff, I still feel lonely because of the lack of the quality of relationship, and that it's so surface level that people aren't very interested, or I don't feel like people are very interested in like who I am as a person, because we have surface level interactions. We laugh, we have fun, but we never really delve into like what we're actually like going through, I guess, because we're just satisfied with the surface level joy of
Mm.
having friends.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a great observation, Jed. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and draw our time to a close. So we've had some really good thoughts, and we'll list the questions that we kind of drew out of that at the end there. But I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for being here and sharing your thoughts and taking the time to participate. Rachel, thank you for hearing from God this weekend and just sharing your heart and his heart with us. And yeah, so appreciated that this morning, and so appreciate you. I obviously, you're a wonderful person, but you're also my sister, and so that, you know, very, very meaningful to me. So thank you.
You got it.
All right. As always, church, stay safe, wash your hands, and we will hopefully see you all again very soon. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.